to another episode of Hand Tool Rescue. Today we have what I believe is at least a 1920s tape dispenser. Believe it or not, it is the most unnecessarily complicated tape dispenser I've ever seen. And therefore, it gets the large wrench treatment. Very few tools get that treatment, but this is one that gets it because it's just so gorgeously ridiculous is probably the best way to describe this. It seems to be made of mostly brass. After 1925, I believe, they switched to an entirely aluminum tape dispenser body. So that's why I'm dating this a little bit earlier than that. Everything kind of lines up with that date as well. The castings also look like they are brass. They might be bronze as well, but they're obviously incredibly dirty right now, so it's kind of difficult to tell. But once we clean those up, we can have a better look and possibly identify the material that they used here. Obviously, this is an unnecessarily expensive tape dispenser to make, considering modern tape dispensers are basically free. So it interests me that this had been around for so long. And by so long, I mean this company went out of business in 2017. The Chauncey Wing mailer company was almost around for this video. Which is very impressive considering the patent for this exact tape dispenser was in the late 1800s. So significant amount of time with a near consistent amount of production quality on all their parts, which is very impressive. Now, getting to the actual disassembly, you can see that it's essentially 600 different screws that all hold things very tightly together, right where the tape needs to be dispensed. And all this intricacy that you see here is basically for the mechanism to actually feed and then cut the tape at a precise position when you press downwards with the tape dispenser body. And you'll see what I mean near the end of the video. So I'm just taking my time kind of sorting out what does come apart easily, what should come apart, so that I don't break things. I hop back and forth between different parts and different locations of this, just trying to get it as fully disassembled as I possibly can. No reason to be forceful and break things. I really did think that this thumb screw was actually a screw, and it ended up being a pin, which is slightly embarrassing. I could have just pulled that out, but the other ones were screws, so I just assumed this one was also. Now, the wooden parts for this tape dispenser, I believe, are cherry. I'm not the master at wood identification, but North American domestic hardwoods are fairly easy to identify, and it would be a smarter choice than something tropical to just add more to the ridiculous expense of this thing, but I really do think it is cherry. And they're heavily varnished, so I'm going to have to recreate that as well. Even just to cut each and every one of these gears is such a process. It just blows my mind that this thing was so popular that the business could be around for so long. It just seems like it would be $600 to dispense tape. There's a little reservoir that would hold water or glue, and there's some holes in that, so I'm going to need to address that as well. Now, the main body, I'm just leaving all as essentially one piece because the castings are soldered on. There's no point in soldering them off just to solder them back on again. So I'm going to leave those and just focus on removing the actual tags with these super tiny drive nails, or drive screws as some people call them. These are the smallest ones I've ever seen. I bought a collection of them of a variety of sizes, and none of them came anywhere close to this, the tininess of these little ones. I'll save that for later and reattach it. There's no need to remake that. It's in fairly good condition. The tag can stay by itself. Not much to go into the evaporust this time, mostly just screws. The screws were obviously steel, and probably, honestly, the only steel parts in this entire product, so they get the rust treatment. Oh, what's this? A screwdriver? Interesting. So my evaporous tub is getting fully used up. It's almost done. It needs some replacing very soon, so you'll probably see that coming up. I'm going to wire wheel the steel portions of this tool and maybe sand and polish up a little bit of the fasteners, and then I'll focus on sandblasting the brass or bronze parts and finally see what is going on. Now you can see the castings are almost copper colored, which is surprising to me. There's a little more copper in there than I'm used to seeing in a brass or bronze casting, but I'm not really sure why that's the case, but it just seems to be the case. There you can see the hole. There's actually two, one on each corner here. Originally soldered, but that solder has possibly been removed somehow or corroded away. I'm not exactly sure. I could try to apply more solder, but this entire box is held together with solder, meaning that the solder would desolder while I'm trying to solder, and therefore I can't just solder one part. I'd need to resolder all of the soldering that's in the box. So I'm not interested in that. I'm just going to use metallic epoxy, and the color will match. Nobody will know. So shellac removed. I'm assuming it's shellac. It looks like shellac. This shellac kind of yellows over time, which this has. And I will then physically remove it with abrasive technology until all the varnish is gone. And then we polish back up the grits, and everything's looking nice. I will hit that with a coat of shellac later on. Same for the handle portion. This one looks significantly better than the other portion, but whatever. Now, I don't have cherry around. I do have this piece of Jatoba that I seemingly use for literally every project on this channel. But I bought this piece 5 years ago, and I'm determined to use all of this because it was expensive. So I will glue these two incredibly flat pieces of Jatoba that I spent time planing and sanding down, so I can minimize the glue gap as much as possible. Apply excessive amounts of glue to ensure maximum adhesion, because I will be spinning this at very high speeds on my metal lathe. And if one of these pieces blew off, my entire face could blow off, so I'm not interested in that currently. Now I'm just drenching my metal lathe in little chips. It's literally snowing wood as I'm trying to, I guess, machine this is the proper word, down to a nice cylinder. And what I'm making here is the roller that goes in the little glue or water box that would pick up the glue or water and apply it to the tape. So that part's completely missing. So I'll need to remake that. Also, something very interesting happened here. As I'm drilling this hole, obviously I go past where the chips can actually escape out of the hole, and there's a fire, and the pressure basically built up and it just fired out of there at high speed. I was very worried that the chips below would start flaming, but I sat there for a little while and it was fine, so that's okay. Now, sanding this one up to, honestly, technically 3000 grit, which is well beyond what is necessary. It just feels so nice. And then I'll spend time actually parting off properly, unlike the first attempt where I just decided to start parting things off, even though that shouldn't have happened. I drilled the hole slightly, and I mean like a 64th under size for this, maybe 1/4 inch pin. So it's kind of a press friction fit in there, and that doesn't need to move or anything. It just needs to stay in place. I'm not even going to glue it because it gets such little movement, and that's all it needs to do. That's literally it. So that piece is done. I may give it a coat of something just for looks, but if it's going to sit in water over time, it'll kind of deteriorate anyways. Not that this is going to get a massive amount of use anymore, but it still looks cool. Now, I am missing another part, and luckily I have a spare later model aluminum tape dispenser of this same make. And I'm kind of siphoning off parts there as I need it. Having a second kind of junk parts tool of literally any restoration I'm going through helps immensely, because making brand new parts is sometimes incredibly difficult and or expensive. So, you know, spending a little extra money to get two of the same item helps out big time. And I suggest that if you can afford it for, you know, smaller tools, it's a good way to save some money. Now I'm going to sharpen these by hand completely on the edge and on the face of both cutters. These act almost exactly like scissors, and that the two sharpened pieces of steel slide across each other, and if anything's in the way, it's going to get cut. And I got them so flat that even the water was making them stick together, so I'm very happy with that. And they are sharp and ready to chop. Now, the fun reassembly process. It's just so much easier to put things back together after they've been excessively cleaned than it is to take them apart when they're dirty. So it's just so nice to do. I always love this part. Now, even that adjuster knob there was a cast piece. You can see those little ridges inside it there. There's no way to machine those. So this was cast and then machined afterwards, which is another ridiculous cost to me. Now I will show you and explain to you kind of what all these parts actually do, but it's best to just kind of see where they go first, and then you'll kind of understand how this whole thing functions. Basically works on a bunch of springs. Now I'm attaching this before I make my life even more difficult and forget to put this on while the entire thing is assembled. Already failed here and having to pull that back, but that should have been the first piece to go on, honestly. This little arm protrusion just presses down on that piece that we just attached in order to keep it down or up based on whatever movement. It basically transfers the movement of that bottom piece to this whole springy contraption portion. So this screw adjusts the angle of the cutter. You want them obviously cutting perfectly perpendicular to each other. And this one essentially sets the distance the cutter is from the cutter within the body. So it moves it back and forth so you get a nice precise cut. If it's too far away, it's obviously not going to cut. Like a loose pair of scissors are not very effective. So I think as things wear or as you adjust during sharpenings, you can adjust for that with these screws. It's just mind-blowing attention to detail. There's a beautifully sharpened body cutter, as I'll call it. So I'm just positioning this anywhere and then adjusting this one with all the adjuster settings to match accordingly, so we have a nice chop action. And here it's way off, so I'm moving it forward until it lines up exquisitely. And then you can adjust that one to adjust the skew to make sure it's perpendicular. And then that's it. The final screw that has yet to be placed in is going to set the actual tension on the moving cutter, as I'll call it. And in that case, once that's set, it should be good to go. Right, and here it is. And here's the example that I want to show you. So you lock that in, and that puts pressure on that pin that I thought was a screw earlier on, and it locks that. So now that cutter's too far away. You tension it up with the pin, and then you tighten down the screw again, and you have that accurate tension that you're looking for, so the settings actually match. And there it is in perfection. You saw me install the roller contraption at the front. I did not take that apart because it's actually pinned together, and there was really no reason. I was able to clean up every single part since they spin without having to get in there and take it apart, so I'm happy about that. This took about 400 years to get these aligned, since they don't actually go straight through. They go diagonally through the steel shaft, these brass pins I'm talking about. So you have to align them exactly how it was when I took it apart, and obviously I don't remember how I took it apart. So it took a while to get those aligned. Now, this is another replacement part from the other tape dispenser. This screw was the one I took off with the massive wrench. I found the appropriate one, not a replacement one, and slapped it on. So, happy about that as well. Those, I believe, are the only two parts that are missing. Now, classically, I make a dumb move and forgot to attach the actual handle before I attach this gear and wooden roller, however you want to call it. So, this needs to go back on, screwed in, and then I can reattach the wooden roller. And that wooden roller in front of the handle, you use your thumb on to advance the tape as you're working. So it's not like a modern tape dispenser where you kind of pull and the tape comes out. This you kind of have to hand feed with, well, I guess thumb feed with your thumb. Now, one of the final pieces is the kind of tape winder, however you want to call it. There's just one slot in it, and that's where you hook the first edge of a piece of tape that's attached to a giant roll, and then you just kind of spin it on. I assume you would have a proper roll that you just slide right through the center of, and you're done, rather than me having to hand feed it all. But it's not 1925 anymore, so I have to make do with the tape I have. This goes back on. I hit it very lightly with some super fine, like quadruple zero steel wool, which can still take off this black on this aluminum. So you got to be very delicate, and it's just a little bit cleaner than it would be otherwise. Now you can see I got some Hand Tool Rescue water activated tape. I had some lying around for something else, and I cut it down to the appropriate size, and then started basically feeding it through like it's supposed to be. Sometimes this would be used with glue, like I said before, but I'm just going to use water here because that's the modern equivalent. And the water makes it all sticky, and then you stick it down to the bench where nothing sticks, and you have yourself a fun taping experience. I believe these were mainly used for mailing up newspaper bundles, I believe. But this seems to work just fine. If you go a little bit slower, the water really gets on there and it becomes really sticky. And the chopping action is just incredibly satisfying. So this tool was just amazing to see in terms of a production level tool. It's just insane to me that this was made for so long, but I absolutely love it. High gizmosity factor. And I hope you enjoyed it too. I will see you all in the next one. Later.